welcome, good evening. My name is Les Isaac, and I want to welcome you to the CTBI and Synergy Network webinar. This webinar is the third that we've been having, entitled Blue is the Color. It's a feature opportunity, further opportunity from present serving police officers as well as youth workers, and you'll be hearing from them. But just before I introduce them, just a few things. Please, please, please put any questions you have in the chat, send us a message, and we'll do our very best to sort of get your question heard and answered tonight. But as you know, like all of these things, many people put questions, and sometimes we're unable to answer or respond to all of them. But please do send them in. If you don't get your question answered, please, please, please just bear with us and just go for it. But I just really believe that this is going to be a great evening, and I'm really excited about the fact that we have with us Andy George, who is the president of the National Black Police Association, and you're going to hear from him. We've been having a little technical problem from Bharat Narbad, who's the chair of the Southwell Black Police Association. So we've been on here since 7 o'clock. There's a little technical problem. We hope that he'll be able to join us later on. Then we have Chief Inspector Jeff Boothe from the Metropolitan Police Service, and you're going to hear from him. We've got Amie Barami. She is the foundation. She is the founder and the CEO of a Christian youth charity called the Hebe Foundation. And then we have Lian Jacobs, who has for over 13 years of experience working with young people in London. So we'll hear from her and her perspective. And then we have Dari Adetuberu, okay? And I hope I pronounced, I'm sorry if I didn't. He's the lead pastor of the RCCG Kingdom Connection, and he's all the way in Dublin. So I want to welcome you all and thank you all very much to be part of this engaged conversation this evening. I'm going to turn over to my co-host, Rosemarie Mallett.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rosemarie Mallett. I'm a priest in the Church of England. I'm the Archdeacon of Croydon. It's fantastic to be here for this next follow-up from our first Blue is the Colour webinar. As you can hear from the introductions, we're going to be engaging with people who are in the diverse communities in 4 nations. So that's going to be fantastic to hear from people throughout Great Britain and also from the Republic of Ireland. Amazing, bringing all these people together. We're going to hear from young people. We're going to hear about issues of institutional racism, issues of stop and search, law and order issues. And we're going to hear about how perhaps lockdown have affected young people and the way in which they have engaged with the police through this period. So time-wise, each speaker is going to have around 5 minutes to talk. Perhaps they're going to just expand a little on their own introductions of who they are and what they do. It's just going to be a face-to-face verbal conversation, so don't be looking for PowerPoints at all. That's not going to happen. After the presentation, there's going to be a Q&A. Again, as Pastor Les says, put those questions into the chat so that we can, the question and answer, so that we can pick them up. And we have about 40 minutes for questions. And I know there's going to be a lot of things that are going to come through. So please do put those in. But now it's time to listen to our speakers. And the first person that we're going to have speak to us is Andy George, President of the National Black Police Association.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. As I said, I'm Andy George. I'm a police officer in just outside Belfast in the Police Service of Northern Ireland, having just completed around about 21 years, and also the president of the National Black Police Association. In relation to my career, I joined at a very young age. I literally turned 20 in October, joined in November, having always wanted to be a police officer. For me, I suppose some of those experiences I had as an ethnic minority person growing up in Belfast or outside Belfast and in Northern Ireland in general, I was often the only person from an ethnic minority that looked visibly different to everybody else. So for me, I suppose a lot of the early experiences I had really give me a strong community drive and a drive to help others. And that's probably what drew me towards the police service. I had a lot of friends and relatives that were in the police service in Northern Ireland at that time, so had a general understanding of what it was. So I didn't have the same barriers perhaps as others. I think whenever I joined back in 1999, the police service in Northern Ireland, I was probably one of about 10 or 15 officers from an ethnic minority and 13,500 police. The population at that time as well was only 0.5% of the population were from Black, Asian or minority ethnic backgrounds. So again, big challenges in kind of how we were coming in, how we were potentially perceived at times. But for me, being that visible role model for communities has really helped kind of, I suppose, bring certain sections of the community closer to the police service. My roles across policing for the first 7 or 8 years, I was in beat and patrol in a response team. Really enjoyed that. That's kind of, for me, that's the cutting edge of policing. That's where you learn your trade and that's where you help people on a daily basis, probably more so than ever. I then moved into the armed response unit, dealing predominantly with gun and knife crime across Northern Ireland for 10 years, and then managed to get promoted on the fast track promotion process, and currently sitting as an inspector in our Equality, Diversity, Inclusion unit. And that also then led to me being the president of the National Black Police Association. So as president of the National Black Police Association, I represent around about 5,000 police officers and police staff members across the UK. That's around about 50 law enforcement and police services across the United Kingdom as well. So quite a responsibility, but for me it's a privilege, and it allows me to see sort of best practice examples across United Kingdom and allow us to share those as best we can. In relation to youth and how important youth is, for me, the youth of today are our future. They're our hopes, and for me, they're the potential to change the outcomes for others and to really make a difference in society. A lot of my community work has been based around young people in Belfast, and a lot of their issues are around hate crime. So in Northern Ireland, as I said, now the population is only about 1.8 to 3% of the population, but that 1 to 3% of the population are getting more hate crimes than the rest through sectarianism. And race hate crime in Northern Ireland has been higher than sectarian hate crime since 2014. So for me, what we had in Northern Ireland was already the foundations of a divided society. So bringing people from different backgrounds into that mix has probably created that increased tension around race. For me, what I always see is the best in people. I think my experience of racism, even in the police service and outside, it's all about people initially seeing the difference in me, but then seeing the similarities as they get to know me. And for me, what I've wanted to do is create that artificial way of doing that. So what I've used is sport to engage young people. The barriers are there in the uniform, and if we are only enforcing young people, and in particular young Black males or young people from ethnic minorities, then that really will drive them across and further away from the police service and stop us really being as effective as we can be. So for me, I've worked with the Irish Football Association, I've worked with the Rio Ferdinand Foundation and another programme called Kick Off at 3, which brings young people from different backgrounds together under the auspice of sport. But what we also do then is look at the kind of the root causes of crime and some of the issues that those communities face around, deprivation, links to inequality and lack of opportunity. And what we do is upskill them. So give them skills around coaching qualifications, community sports leaders awards. And for me, that's really empowering the community and building the capacity of the community to help look after themselves and become peer mentors. That for me is the way that we are going to tackle the race hate problem in Northern Ireland. It's by bringing young people together, exposing them. That's what's going to break down those myths and misinformation. And for me, then that will lead to a more cohesive society and really pushing the youth, I think, is the way about doing that. As well as that, you push them into employability as well. So for me, it's really taking young people, bringing the best out of them and then giving them the amount of opportunities as they can. But really looking forward to the conversation this evening, and happy to get into the issues around institutional racism, stop and search. For me, institutional racism is still a thing in policing. It's still present, and the McPherson definition is still applicable to us, unfortunately. But for me, what we need to remember about that is that it's not all about individual officers. It's more about our systems and processes. And again, I'm happy to chat about that later. So I think I'm probably picking up my 5 minutes. So
thank you, and thank you, Andy. That's really fantastic.
So our next speaker is Amie Buhari. So Amie, over to you.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me. My name's Amie Buhari. I'm the CEO and founder of the Hebe Foundation. We are a Christian youth organisation working across London, helping young people to realise and utilise their talents and their giftings. I've worked in various capacities over my 28 years of youth worker experience, working with the council, working with the police as well, actually, together with the community support officers, trying to bridge that gap and forge that relationship between young people and the police. We mainly work at the Hebe Foundation with young people from Black and Asian cultures, not exclusively at all, but it just so happens that the areas we work in are more populated by those particular groups. And for us, it's an ongoing concern, I would say, to be able to have the young people express themselves in a way that does not come about as provoking or behavior that could be seen by society and the police as antisocial and potentially criminal. Young people are desperately trying to get their voice heard, especially after this year, last year and this year, and the problems and challenges that have come about of that lockdown, COVID, obviously George Floyd killing, racism, all these different things. There's just so many reasons why young people's voices need to be heard right now. And they do want to speak, and they want to speak in a safe platform. There's a lot of emotions going on. It turns from anger to frustration to apathy to there's just no lack of hope or this discouragement. But you can see that there is a need around young people to want to change society, to want to change how they are looked upon by the police, by society in relation to crime and community engagement. I was reading a statistic that came out that Sadiq Khan was talking about, how nearly 9 out of 10 children held in custody on remand in London are from a BAME background. And that is a reality, I would say, but it's a very sad one, and one that we definitely need to look to change, which means we have to work together, we have to be collaborative. And I know, having spoken to many, to the police, I know that they are making good moves in order to do that, to bridge that gap, to make that connection with young people. But there is a sense of distrust. There's a sense of distrust there, especially when it comes to our Black young people and Asian as well. What if I give to this connection? If I take a step forward, what am I going to get back in return? There's that question that goes on in our young people's minds. If I answer your questions, or if I provide information, or if I look even like I'm cooperating, even, is how would that be taken? How would that be seen? How would that be seen amongst my peers? And how is the police actually going to respond? Are they going to respond in a way that is actually going to keep me safe? And is my voice going to be heard? So we have lots of conversations with our young people around this, and thinking on ideas on how we can create a more proper, authentic, a real connection with the police, with institutions that are rooted in trust. And I think trust is the key here. It really is the key. I had this discussion last year, and at the moment, and we spoke about this earlier before we came on air, that police are seen as enforcers. that's how they're seen, especially in a young person's eye, you know. Even myself growing up in London, and even now, like if I'm driving and I see a police car, I automatically get a little bit, you know, scared for some reason. And why should I? I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've lived here all my life, but yet I feel a little bit tense, you know, within myself. And so imagine how our young people feel when they're walking on the street or they've been stopped in their cars, you know, or they're pulled over, whether it's necessity or not, you know. So there's a sense of these are the enforcers, you know, and they're coming to do me wrong. But what we need to do is we need to change the narrative. We need to change the rhetoric, and police need to become the encouragers. They need to become the enablers, encouraging our young people to push past societal, cultural, economical barriers, push past that, and to be what they have called to be. They need to be encouragers to for young people to feel that they can speak up and talk, and knowing that they will be heard and they will be reasoned with in a way.
Stop you there, Amie.
Okay,
sorry. Because that's so interesting. I'm sure we're all fascinated, but we want to also hear from the others, because you've asked some questions, you provided some answers, and people will want to hear more. So now we're going to go to Lian, also in London, and she's going to give us her experiences as well.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Andy and Amie, that was amazing. And I literally have come back everything, especially that Amie was saying. So I'm actually in Birmingham. London would like to take me, but I'm still in Birmingham. And although I look 18, I've been doing youth work for 15 years. And it's the only thing I believe that the Lord called me to do. So it's really special to me. Young people are really special to me. I've worked at youth centres across Birmingham, Leeds and London, and worked on a cruise ship as a youth centre manager. Bet you didn't know there was young people on cruise ships, but there are. I recently stepped down as the National Youth Director for the Church God of Prophecy, and I was doing that for 4 years, which was incredible. And I suppose at this point, I kind of want to piggyback off of some of the things that Amie said that I thought were really interesting. And as you said earlier, Jeff, who you hear from later, mentioned something around it being the police service. And I don't know, it's really ringing in my head, it's ringing in my heart, the fact that when you are serving, you are helping, you are doing something to help someone else, you are providing a service that is intended around bettering someone else. And I feel like, as Amie said, there is a misrepresentation of that narrative. I feel like the idea of the police force is something that young people are so, not even just young people, even as adults, sometimes we are uncomfortable with the idea of force. And so if there are concepts around the police and around authority that even some adults struggle with, how more so for young people? Young people will struggle with the idea of being told what to do without necessarily understanding a process or understanding a consequence. And so in my time, particularly in youth centres, I've really tried to engage with local police officers to get them to come in, which is a difficult thing, not for the police officers. I've always actually found that police have been so warm to the idea. It's more convincing my young people to be nice, to be respectful, and to understand that there are actually police officers that care and that want to serve and that want to help. However, if you never give them the opportunity, will you ever see that side of them? And so it's unfortunate, but it is a reality that a lot of our young people they detest the police. They will not cooperate, they will not collaborate, they will not listen. And so it's a shame that people who are called to serve them are not able to do that to their full capacity, because there are things like racism, because they have experienced unfair and ill treatment from police. And it seems like the minority are affecting the majority. And so there's thoughts around representation So young people seeing themselves in the police force, and there being forums for the police to also safely share their stories with young people and say, look, like, you could do this, you could be serving your community, you could be transforming lives and helping in certain ways. So I feel like in a time when the world has never seemed less safe, you know, with health, things that are going on, with the year that we've just had, there's a massive gap that young people are feeling. And it would be amazing if somehow we can work together with churches, with polices, with different organizations to bring these people together, because there are police that want to serve. And so I'm really encouraged by this conversation, and I will not take up much more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Liam, thank you, Liam.
Dari is going to continue that theme for us, and Dari is coming all the way from Dublin. So Dari.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hi from Dublin. Thank you for having me here. And I'm here at the request of the Irish Council of Churches. My name is Adetuberu. I pastor in a community called Tyrrelstown in Dublin. I've been there for the last 18 years now. But I also created an initiative called TYT Soul. It's an initiative for young people, targeting people in the last class of primary school and the first year of secondary school, to try and give them sort of a sense of social responsibility. So the idea of the project is to get them to come up with ideas. And these are 6 schools in total that are around the town, with the principals and teachers and everybody. So they come out, they identify projects, and they go out and do what, there are different levels of activities. We, the adult volunteers, do what is beyond their capacity. So, and the whole idea had come up because of an incident that had happened earlier in the community. I'll get back to that in a minute. But I also sit on what is called the National Gather Strategy Forum, which is the police diversity strategy forum in Ireland. So I have an opportunity to work with them, and also on what is known as the Dublin City Interfaith Forum. So I'm quite involved in a lot of things that involve diversity on both ends, both working with the police and within the community. For us in the migrant community in Ireland now, the big elephant in the room for us is the recent killing of a young man, George Nkencho. So while the investigation is going on, but the communication with the community by the police had left a lot of work to be done. So where that is now in the communities, there's a lot of goodwill, a lot of trust has been lost. So years of work that we've done, people of good faith, so many people involved in all these projects, so many people are deflated. So that's the reality of where we are now. But as a person of faith, sorry, I'm a pastor, pastors will preach. James chapter 2, verse 17 says, faith without works is dead. We have to get up from being deflated and saying, look, we still have to do something, pick ourselves back up, try and do a few things. So we've been working and trying to see how we can build the trust back. Okay, while we don't get involved with law enforcement or try to delay, but communicate with the community, get people on board what is really going on. And I have the privilege to actually be training the police here. I wanted that to be out there because those are initiatives that are going on. Yesterday, there's another training going on tomorrow. Interaction with the migrant community. It's just not really just a one-man show, but we're transitioning from that, hopefully after COVID is gone, to do town hall meetings. We want to really get all stakeholders involved. We want to get the youths involved. Because the police also have their own perspective, which they share as well. They say, look, Dari, you're preaching in the church. Imagine somebody wants to capture something and they come and put the phone to your face. So that's what we face. It's hard for us to do our job. People should be sensitive. So we're hoping we'll get, that kind of town hall style thing going to really try and build trust, which is very, very fragile right now. So, but in like a lot of things have been said by Andrew, by said by Anne, by said by Lian, with the impact of police on youth culture is just on point, you know. And what we need to know is that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the way it is with teenage culture, you know, youth culture. And we know generally through social media or everything that we might have experienced that, you know, gang culture is usually glamorized, you know. So as someone that had that kind of background myself, you know, I know when you're a young person, that's what looks cool. It doesn't look cool, you know, cooperating with the police and all that. So that's the reality. But if we have a dialogue going between all parties, we can have at least shared values that we can agree on to build a safe space for everybody. So that's the effort we're making. That's what we're trying to be about in all our involvements. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daria. I'm hearing words like communication, dialogue, encouragement, trust, a safe space. So I'm going to turn now, because I'm not sure that Baz has been able to join us at this point. And if he hasn't, I'm going to turn now to Chief Superintendent Jeff Boothe to see if he can pick up on some of those words and talk to us a bit more about what the police are doing or can do.
Okay, so good evening to everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. My role, I work within the Metropolitan Police within London. My specific role at the moment is focusing on the Metropolitan Police's drive to increase the numbers of females and people from underrepresented groups to join the Metropolitan Police. Now, I recognize that at this moment in time, that is probably one of the most challenging roles that we currently have, because we know confidence within policing is low. Confidence within certain sections of the community is at an all-time low. So the approach that I am adopting with my team, there are four main pillars behind it. And I think it's vitally important that I outline the approach, because it resonates with a lot of what I've heard many of the speakers that have said so far. The first pillar is about building confidence. The second pillar is about informing people about the opportunities that there are within policing. Then it's looking to inspire people to consider a career within policing. And the final pillar is looking to get people to act by actually applying. Now, there is absolutely no way that my team can get people to the stage of listening to what we've got to say until we start to have some of those difficult conversations, to listen to some of the questions that they want to ask. Have those questions about stop and search, have those questions about institutional racism. Because until we have those conversations, you will not be in a position where someone is prepared to listen to what we've got to say. So what my team are actively doing is going out into the community. At the moment, a lot of that is done via Teams, Zoom, via social media because of restrictions due to COVID. And we are looking to engage with as many different groups as possible. So if there's anybody on here that's part of a group that would be interested in having further conversations, we would be very, very interested in having those conversations with you. Because what we are finding is by us being able to demonstrate that we are prepared to listen, because that is the first stage in having any kind of relationship, is being able to show that you have got the respect and that you are prepared to listen to the viewpoints that somebody has got. Quite often by listening and then having the conversation, we can then dispel some of the myths that have built up over time. But at the same time is to recognize that there are real issues out there. The positive side is that we want to let people know that there are job opportunities within the Metropolitan Police. There are the traditional police officer roles. The new entry routes is that you can join the police and gain a degree at the same time. You can also join the police and not join to become a uniform officer. You can become a detective, direct entry. Now, those are police officer roles, but there are also roles if you're interested in being part of media, if you're part of HR, finance. There are so many different roles within the police service. We have over 31,000 police officer positions within the Met. And in addition to that, over 6,000 police staff roles that cover a multitude of opportunities. But one of the things that I want to be really, really key with everybody on this call, only by us having direct, honest conversations can we get to a stage where we can work with young people, but also career changes, because the opportunities to join the Met range from the ages of 18 to 57. So it's not just about young people. There will be some people out there that will be looking to change their career. And I'm saying to you that there are real opportunities to join and make a difference. So I believe that's my 5 minutes, and I'm more than happy to pick up any questions that you have throughout this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you. And thank you all very much for that. And I see that the chat questions are coming up a lot. And I know that Rosemarie is working on those in terms of us being able to respond. But, you know, one of the themes that's coming out of this discussion so far is the trust and how can or how should the police and how can the police build better relationship? I want to throw that first of all before we come to the police to answer that. But I wonder if Amie or Lian or Diary just answer that. How do you believe the police, what should the police do to build stronger and better relationship? Let's just have that question answered by those guys. Then we're going to go to the police to get some response from that. Thank you, Lian.
So like any good, strong relationship, there needs to be great communication. There needs to be transparency. There needs to be honesty and openness. And I feel like there are people, police officers, that want to do that. However, is there some kind of trading? Is there some kind of refreshing the values of what the police service is about, so that they can start to think about how they're approaching young people, how they're speaking to them, how they're helping them to keep their dignity. So even if they're in the wrong, helping them to understand that process is different to actually attacking, being forceful. And so I feel like there's things around general basic communication skills and an approach to young people that still gives them dignity, still gives them respect, even when they may not deserve it in your eyes, but because you are a servant, you go with that intention. So I feel like those are some of the things that could be done. Thank you.
Amie, why don't you just come in here, Amie, and just get your take on this?
Yeah, I agree with everything Lian is saying. Communication is key. Also, just like on a practical level, you don't need to come in your uniform. Come, if you're coming to speak to a young person, you know, not in a context of there's a situation happening, but like, let's say you do get that space to come and speak to them, you know, come as you are. First of all, they need to see the police as human beings. Yeah, they need to see them as human beings. Actually, this person is potentially could be my brother. This person potentially could be my dad. This person potentially could be my sister, could be my mum. We need to start seeing each other as human beings. And equally so, the police need to see young people in that way as well. This is my son, this is my daughter. And if we have that attitude on both sides, we start to then take away that dehumanization kind of thing. We take away those barriers. So it's about coming as you are and being vulnerable, you know, really being vulnerable. When we're working with our young people, sometimes we've got to give of ourselves some stories, some real life stories of ourselves that's going to be able to meet young person where they're at and connect with them. It's about making that connection. So I think the police are going to have to be vulnerable. The police have to take that. They have to take a bigger step than the young people. To be honest, they're going to need to do that.
Thank you. Darren, before you come back, because I was particularly interested in you talk about the community. There's a load there, and I want to come back to you in a minute, Darren. But let me just first of all get Andy to respond to this, and then we'll come back to you. And then we get Jeff to say, Jeff to sum that up before Rosemarie give us one of the questions. Thank you, Andy. Andrew.
Yeah, no, communication is part of it. But for me, any good relationship is only built up over time. As a police service, I think in 2014-15, we did withdraw a lot of our community engagement teams. Part of that was because of budget constraints. And I think that has had a big impact in our trust and confidence and our ability to engage, particularly with young people, but with communities in general. I always say that community engagement is crime prevention. And for me, from a policing perspective, it needs to be seen in that light. If we do not create informal touch points where young people and police officers can get to meet each other, can start to see the best in society and the best in all communities, and allow the community also to see, as you said, the person beneath that uniform, I think that's where we really start building that trust and confidence. I think policing in the past has been guilty. We often come to Black and Asian communities when we're looking something. If I'm honest, it's, we're looking recruitment, we're looking hate crime, and we often just come in, we get our photo taken, put it out in our social media channels, and that community don't always see us for a long period of time, generally until we're looking at something else again from them. So for me, it's about doing that engagement whenever the community doesn't need us, just being there, doing genuine engagement, genuine kind of initiatives to help work with other partners and really give something back to the community. I think that for me is what will really build trust and confidence over time.
Thank you. Darry, why don't you come in, Darry, and then we'll go to Jeff before we move on.
Yeah, thank you. I think Andrew's just spot on there. That's, I think, happened right across the border here in Ireland, the budget cuts to community policing. But the effect of community policing was really what was needed, to prevent the situation that we're in right now. So, and like you're saying, I don't know how the budget is made, but between crime prevention and law enforcement, I don't know which one costs more, but it should be, addressed, reviewed and found out, because the community engagement police actually they remove the objectification of people, and stereotypes and everything, and they just brought the human face of the police right to everybody. So I have a lot of community police that are personal friends. I don't actually see them as police. I see them as friends. They see me as a friend too. We call each other on different things. If there's an issue happening, or how can we de-escalate this? And I actually go to places on their behalf. I go to speak to people, and that's it. No need to send out the squad car and all those kind of things. So I think we need to really, as a community, as a society together, really need to re-examine, the culture of policing and the society that we want to produce. Is it harmonious, or where people are objectified and they're in different pockets all over the place? Or do we want the police service that really engages with people as ordinary people, and they have friends there, they know them, they're on first name basis, and you can, of course you will always have criminal elements, but you now can, isolate them. They won't have the encouragement.
Thank you. Jeff, I know that you're here in this big, metropolis of London, and with all sort of things. And Darry's right. You've got your criminal aspect, but you've got your respectable people, the law-abiding people. Jeff, how do you see it?
Well, I think I wouldn't disagree with what I've heard so far, but I would put a slightly different context to it. And what I mean by that is, if we're talking about underrepresented groups, if we're talking about the Black community, we've got to change our mindset. And what I mean by that is we need to move away from this them and us type mentality, where we're talking about young people against the police or Black people against the police. And the reason I say that is until we move away from that and recognize that we, i.e. the Black community, underrepresented groups, have the right to expect a service from the police, just as they have a right to expect from the health service or education. They have a vested interest in the police service and should be holding the police service to account. But also there's a responsibility for us, if we want to bring about change, we have got to have more representation from diverse groups inside the police to bring about the changes that we need. If you talk about young people, where are the parents? Where are the adults that are bridging the gap to enable these conversations to take place? There is a collective responsibility across the board that if we want to see this change, we all have to play a part in it, because if you're going to have a relationship, it's a two-way process. The police have a lot of work to do, but we also need young people, parents, adults to be stepping up to make sure that we have a service that we actually want, and that requires a vested interest and participation in bringing about the service that we want.
Thank you for that. Rosemarie?
I'm going to just take one of our questions, which just sits right within what you've just said, Jeff. It says, my son wanted to be a policeman, but due to the problems that's been happening, particularly in the last year, he's said, why when we have Black policemen and women, we're still having this issue of misunderstanding and bad treatment of Black people?
Can I ask that one?
Yep.
Because we don't have enough in the organization. We need to have more. The proportion of Black and underrepresented groups within the policing service is woeful. But what is even more worrying is that we don't have enough females and underrepresented groups at the most senior levels, because it's at those levels you can bring about the real change. That does take time. And all I would say to the young person that considered a career in policing, do not be put off. We want people to consider a career in policing. It is not easy, but it is rewarding because it is a service. You are giving back to people. It's one of the most rewarding vocations. It's not a job, it's a way of life, but it's very, very challenging. And what I'm saying to you, the changes that I'm talking about, I'm realistic. It's not going to happen overnight, but if we really want that change to happen, we've got to ask ourselves, what are we each doing to bring about that change? It's very easy to point the fingers and saying that this isn't happening, but we've got to ask ourselves, what are we prepared to do to bring about the changes that we all should want?
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to just go to Andy for that. Andy, you talked about institutional racism, and people are asking, how are the police addressing institutional racism within the organization, and what's happening with regard to public, how do the public know what's happening in that regard?
Yeah, no, I mean, institutional racism has been a label that policing has really struggled with. It's one that they've denied an awful lot of the time, and I think in denying the fact that institutional racism is a real thing, that it's present in policing, I think that's denying community experiences. And I think that's what erodes trust and confidence. As I said, it's not up to the police service to say whether we are or not. I personally think we are. But for me, I was chatting to Stuart Lawrence earlier today, Stephen Lawrence's younger brother, about a few things we're working on, and the impact that the way the Metropolitan Police at that time viewed Stephen, viewed his family, and the way that they treated them afterwards, that added to their trauma and losing their son, and that led to the McPherson inquiry and the report that followed. for me, that was a watershed moment. It was, monumental in any terms. It brought about the definition of institutional racism, definitions from hate crime, and a number of other things for us. I don't think it's up for us to say we are or we aren't. I think when the community tell us that we are, and I think we do have a firm enough evidence base to say that we are, and that the community are telling us so, then it's for us to listen, to actually listen to what's being done, admit that the problem exists, and then we can put measures in place to alleviate that. For me, I think the constant denial is what's eroding or stymieing our actual potential to actually change it. I would have done sort of psychological therapy and stuff as well at different times, and part of my life as well. And anybody that's alcohol dependent cannot overcome that issue without first admitting that they have a problem. To say that you don't drink anymore, or we're not as racist as we used to be, isn't going far enough, and it isn't ever going to overcome the problems completely. So I think policing have tried over the last 20 years probably to move on this issue. I think they've brought in some well-intentioned measures, but for me, the key thing that was missing was those internal cultural assets, like those people I represent in the National Black Police Association, like Jeff, police officers from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds actually taking charge and driving some of these actions. For me, that's what was missing, that real cultural competence and that lived experience around the issues. But the denial's a bit that for me is the key to the kind of starting the process of healing and reconciliation.
Thank you so much, Andy. I want to turn to the young people, to the people who work with young people. We've heard Jeff talk about the opportunities. Andy's been very blunt and told us exactly what it's like, but what it's also needed. Have you had conversations with young people about joining the police force? I'm talking to Lian, I'm talking to Amie. Have you had any conversations with young people? Because you do work with young people and try to bridge the gap. Have you heard any conversations?
Yeah, so not so much in my role now because I work in a different kind of arena, but previously in youth centres, I absolutely have, because there are young people that I have met across my years of doing youth work that I think are so passionate about helping other people, are passionate about, it sounds strange, but following rules. They know their rights, they want to be right, and they want to make sure that people are safe, and they have a real care. And it may not be directed in the way that we'd hope it might be, but the potential for them to be able to serve as a police officer, protecting their community where they've been brought up, their brothers and sisters, their neighbours, is really great. And so we did invite a group of officers in over, I think it was over about 4 weeks. And the conversation, the first 2 weeks, it was vile. The young people gave them hell, but they came back for the next 2 weeks, and the respect level the young people had for them increased, because they thought, okay, you weren't weak, like we gave you a hard time, but you stuck with it. And that was the beginning of quite a good relationship. It wasn't with lots of officers, but there were two in particular that stood out, and I know that they've had really good lasting memories on young people. So that's definitely something I would encourage. Is it an easy conversation? Absolutely not.
Okay, and Amie?
Yeah, I mean, we've had that conversation sporadically around. Occasionally you get a young person who says, I would like to join the police. If it's in a group setting, majority of the time, other young people will give them a look, or will say something that will, if that young person isn't strong enough, will shut them down. We're all about you using your gifts and talents to further yourself and your community. So we don't discourage anybody at all if they was say they wanted to go into the police. So it's in honesty, it's been few. It's been a few. But yeah, then there needs to want to serve, to want to protect, and that might come from something that's happened, an incident in their life, an experience in their life, that they feel that now the way to go will be a route of protection. I need to protect my family, I need to protect myself. And they see the police as a career choice that would be able to do that. But in reality, the amount of young people who say to us, I want to join the police force is very small. Around from where we're operating, but there are so many benefits to it, and like Jeff said, there are so many different jobs within the police. It's not just to be a policeman or woman or a detective or constable. You know, there's so many different varieties of jobs, and I think that just needs to be publicized even more than it already is. And I know they're doing a lot of work around that, but you know, just saying these are the different routes, these are the different things you can do, you know, and really that whole let's work from the inside out. Yeah.
Okay. Let's
just to say that we should have had with us Baz, the chair of the South Wales Police Association, with us. We're still hoping he could join us. There's been a bit of technical problem there, but Baz, we really appreciate you keep trying so that we can hear from South Wales this evening. There's a theme coming through in terms of youth workers are saying, actually, when we have had police in talking to young people, it can be a bit rough, but with consistency, it gets smoother. Now, it was interesting. I was speaking to some youth workers last night, and they were saying the same thing, that, you know, doing things with young people online, it was tough, but they met them. And after a few weeks, you know, it was really great stuff. Now, again, I think one of the myths is that people think that police is always there. And there's a lot of pressure on police. There's been cuts. There've been people moving. There are some real obstacles. And I wonder if Jeff or Angie could tell us about some of those obstacles, because I think sometimes the police score own goals in terms of not being consistent, moving officers, and also shortage of police officers. What are some of those things? Because if we're getting police officers working with young people or meeting them and it's working, why don't we continue building those bridges? Jeff?
Yeah, so there's many layers to your question, but I think the real challenge that the police service face is, more often than not, when you're looking at dealing with an issue, whether or not it's knife crime, serious youth violence, the most effective way of tackling it is a kind of a multi-agency approach, which requires police in partnership with education, local authorities, and also the business sector. Because quite often, speaking to young people, you speak to them and many of them will turn around and say, right, what are my opportunities? What is there out there for me? And quite often, many of them choose a life of crime because they feel that they're not going to get a fair break within society as a whole, because they're stereotyped, there's the stigma and all the other things that go with it. Now, in order for that young person to have that change in mindset, that cannot be done solely by the police. We have got to work with other partner agencies. But what has already been said is, due to austerity cuts, if you're getting local authorities having reduced budgets, if you're seeing within education more pressures on teachers, and if you look at exclusion rates within some schools, and you look at the disproportionate numbers of young people from underrepresented groups that are being excluded, is it any wonder that the engagement more often with police is from a negative perspective? So in terms of solution, it needs to be a multi-agency approach. But what more than normally happens is the police are seen as the problem, whereas more often than not, we need to change that view. And if you then also ask a commander of a geographical area, if they are faced with the stark reality of rising knife crime, and they are being asked to tackle those issues to save lives, quite often they will make a decision to move some of those community officers that they would like to keep there. But their priority is dealing with the here and now in saving lives. And that's the difficult balance that commanders face. I faced that myself. In an ideal world, you'd like to keep those officers engaged in schools, engaged in youth engagement. But if you are being tasked with saving lives, you will move those officers to prevent that from happening. It's a very, very difficult challenge to face.
Jeff, I know that I think the very first time I met you was at a funeral service for a young boy who was stabbed to death, or a memorial service. That's, I think, the first time I met you. And
Yes.
what was fascinating in one sense, in that very sad environment, in one sense, was there were a lot of people there who were willing to do good, to offer their service. They don't want to be trained as police officers, but they had skills. There were teachers there, there were mothers there, there were grandparents. Somebody put in the chat, what about faith groups, whether churches or other faiths? What about local people who have no faith, but they're doing some fantastic piece of work? What about those kind of collaboration and using those people? And for me, those are the soft touch. What's happening in that circle? Because we run something called Synergy, and we've got a lot of organizations that's linked to us who are all doing fantastic work. What about the collaboration there? Is that working?
Well, to say to you, Les and Rosemarie, and one of the reasons why I'm here is because of the fact that I am looking to be working with the faith community, with charities. In fact, we will work with anybody and everybody that wants to make a positive change. It cannot be done solely by policing. I talk about multi-agency, but it's also working with faith leaders, key influencers that are not part of any group, but they have a standing within the community. But what it needs is that joint up approach. Quite often, it's more effective if it's not police-led, because if it's community-led, they feel that they are steering and we are there as a partner to move stuff forward. But this is such an important issue, and it's one of those things that I'm really, really passionate about, is that yes, I'm focused on recruitment, but I know that this is a long-term commitment. I am not looking to come along and say, join the Met Police, and in 5 minutes we're going elsewhere. For me, this is a 4 to 5 year commitment, at least, to deliver this, because we've got to have those conversations. Andy has said, if you're going to build a relationship, it does not happen overnight. We have got to show that we are doing this for the long term.
Thank you.
I just wanted to check, Les, just while we're there. Can I just check if Baz is with us? I can see his name. I'm not sure if he's actually been able.
Hi. Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, so it would be really good, because I know you haven't had the opportunity because of technology, and I know we can't see you, but could you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do? And you've heard perhaps some of what we've been talking about, so maybe you can add a little to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, real huge apologies. Typical. I never have a problem with Zoom, and for some reason today my tablet just won't work for me. And it's probably an advantage that you can't see me actually. But you know, I just wanted to pick up on a few points. Oh yeah, if I very quickly tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a police officer of 23 years service. I was born in India. I came over here when I was 2-3 years old. Always wanted to join the police. I joined later in life because when I initially wanted to join, they had a height restriction. And being, how can I say, vertically challenged, I couldn't get in when I left school. So I went to work for a bank, and then I found out that they had dropped the height restriction. So late 90s, I joined. Round about the time of this, you know, the Macpherson report around the Stephen Lawrence murder. So there was a lot of tension in the community that I was from, which was Riverside in Cardiff, which is quite a multicultural area of Cardiff. And you know, I'd always wanted to join the police, but I had friends and even my brothers saying, you know, you shouldn't join the police. But I was determined then. So I can see some of the issues that the youths have when they're getting this. But the couple of points that I've picked up whilst I've been listening to some fantastic speakers is around consistency, and I've got to agree with Superintendent Jeff Boothe around, you know, consistency is so important. You know, in my 23 years, I've worked in areas, and I speak to faith group leaders, different places of worship, and the one thing they used to tell me is, do you know what? We know when promotion season is, because that's when the officers decide to come visit the church, or that's when they come to visit the mosque. You know, it's very frustrating. And the other part of consistency is, in the past, you know, the South Wales Police as a force, we got someone to do recruiting for 6 months to tick the box, and then it was gone. There was nothing. Once people were in the job, then there was no sense of retention or progression. And that again, as chair of our BPA, Black Police Association in South Wales, was very frustrating. Now, luckily, the good news is, in the last 5 years, and this is down to the leadership, they've actually employed myself and another officer to full time to go into places of worship, community centres, and we've got a really good plan in terms of recruiting, and we're getting some really good successes in that. We will get names of people who are interested. We'll go out there, we'll dispel some myths, and then every single person who says, do you know what, yeah, I want to find out more, we will allocate them the mentor. When it comes to the application forms, we do upskill sessions. When it comes to the assessment centre, we will do upskills for that. You know, positive action, and that's really worked. We've gone from under 1% to just over 3%. I know that's not great numbers, but when you think, you know, when you've already got a small amount of people within the service who are from a BAME background, then it does make a difference. But yeah, sorry, I know we were steering away from recruitment, but I just wanted an opportunity just to give my point of view in terms of consistency. So apologies again for not being here earlier.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining us. One of the questions that's asked, and I want to make sure that we continue to work with speak to our youth leaders, but people have been asking, what support do you police officers, you UKME police officers get? Because obviously in an institution where racism still abounds and you're out there working on the front line of engaging with the community, do you get support?
Do you want, should I cover that?
Well, why don't Andy start first, and then?
Yeah, well, I think given the role of the National Black Police Association, you know, officers and staff members' well-being across the board, just for general police officers, haven't been great. In recent years, there have been a lot more put into this area. You know, the National Black Police Association, the local Black Police Associations, which Baz is chair of, you know, they are, for me, the staff associations that are there to support those officers. Not every Black, Asian, minority ethnic officer or staff member is a member of the NBPA, but we are there to support those officers when they need us the most. We never turn anybody away. So there are networks around there. I think having people, like for me, a lot of the time it is about isolation. It's about being isolated in the workplace, maybe finding that you're getting certain treatment. That can sometimes make you a little bit paranoid and think that you are overreacting whenever you're sitting in a room speaking to somebody that are having similar experiences, that understand where you're coming from. That for me is a support that we offer. We also then do a lot of support around how we kind of, I suppose, mentor and create that next senior leadership kind of roles for ethnic minorities as well. But the rigors and stressors that ethnic minority officers face is definitely compounded by their ethnicity, and it's on top of the everyday stresses that they already have, because, you know, policing is a deeply traumatic career. It is, you know, you go to some of the most horrendous incidents that you could ever imagine. Being in the armed response unit, we just dealt with general gun and knife crimes, so a lot of gunshot wounds, a lot of stabbing incidents as well. So seeing that over time can have an impact on a lot of people, and having that kind of safe space to vent in that area where you can speak to people that are from a similar background, I think for me personally is key to making sure that people are fit and healthy and able to kind of cope and deal with those pressures. But racism's definitely still an issue. You know, it's enforced. The amount of people that we support across the board is still there. And again, the issues that they face can be from lack of training, lack of temporary promotion opportunities, lack of opportunity in general in force. And then when they do actually become whistleblowers or chat about the discrimination they're facing, sometimes the organisation can come down and kind of almost defend the actions of the person that has actually discriminated against them for a number of reasons. But that then adds to the impact. And I think we're creating a lot of secondary trauma in our officers and staff, which needs to be dealt with better.
Thank you. And maybe Baz and then Jeff, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just reiterate everything Andy says. As a support organisation, the BPA and the NBPA will fully support all our, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic officers. And I sort of touched on what we're doing in our force, in that, we don't just recruit, we got to make sure there's an avenue for retention and progression, because we know the figures aren't great for officers who are at the top of the line. Also, when our colleagues are out on the front line, they are going to face racism, and a lot of them are going to be victims of hate crime. And what I've started doing, or our BPA have done in our force, is every single person who, officer or member of staff, who faces any discrimination, either from members of the public or internally, are automatically referred to myself, and then we will offer that support. And I think that's really important. So there is support there, and I mentioned about what happened previously, and I think most police forces in the UK now are putting a greater emphasis on health and well-being. I know our force certainly has, and I'm sure that echoes across all the forces, and how much that is important, the mental well-being as well as the physical well-being. So there is that support, and certainly the NBPA and the local BPAs are part of that welfare and support.
Thank you. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just build on what has been said. I know there's been a lot of focus on race, but I think we also need to be mindful of the challenges that are faced by females and females from underrepresented groups. And that is also an area that we've got to be actively focused on. You imagine a female from an underrepresented group, it's like a double jeopardy. So there is a lot of work that is going on. One of the things that within the Met Police, we are not very good at advertising and making it aware about the raft of measures and support that is provided. Staff support associations do a fantastic job. Health and well-being is there, but we need to be able to demonstrate to people what support is being provided. There was talk previously about Black Lives Matters. There were a number of officers from public order that were from minority backgrounds that were out there on the front line getting additional abuse. Now, what we had to do is make sure that at the end of their duty, before they booked off, we had that wraparound service, giving them that additional support, making them aware that they were supported. But it's how do we then continue that? Because sometimes the stress that they do feel can manifest itself at later stages. So there is a lot of work that is being done. There's a lot more that can be done, but we need to make sure that people are aware that those services are there for them to support them.
Thank you so much. Just picking up one of the questions, it was about parenting, and I don't think that there was an intention to blame parents for not raising their children properly and being part of the problem. But I think what was being said was that parents are part of the solution. But one of the things that we've found in the work that we're doing in Croydon between the community and the police group that meets together is the recognition is that when you work with a young person, you must also find ways to work with their families as well, because it is that context from which they come that we all need to understand. So for our young people and for Dare, do you do work with the family of the young people that you are working with?
Yes, by all means, thank you very much. Because of the church setting, so that provides the ample opportunity for us to do that. So we wouldn't actually work in isolation with any young person. We will have the parents involved and with an ongoing support for them and assessing their needs and what they need to go on to. And with that kind of approach, it always works well, because the young people, sometimes they might have the difficulty at home, then they can't communicate with you, and you're going to bring the parents into confidence in a safe place, and that always works for them all the time. So I think that's a perfect approach to go. Dealing with them in isolation, particularly in the context where we operate, where we have the second generation of migrant. This is the first generation of children. They have that identity crisis. Most of them have to do with the parents from maybe the African or whatever original background they came from, and they're living in an environment with their friends that are expecting them to conform to the norm. So if the families are not involved, you can't handle the identity crisis that is even causing internal conflict for the young people.
Thank you. Lian?
So could you repeat the question just so I can make sure?
It's about the nexus around young people, because we know that no one person exists just as an atom. And so when you do work with the young people, do you also find ways to connect to their wider group, particularly their families?
Absolutely. I think that's probably one of my other joys is getting involved with the family. And I think for me, it's easier to work with the family and the young person than just work with the young person. For many reasons, it's a win-win situation. The parent or guardian understands that if they are struggling to get through to a young person about a particular thing, they will come to the youth worker. I've had it many a time when a mother has called and he's saying, Lian, if you don't talk to such and such, I don't know what's going to happen, because they're so overwhelmed with what's going on. And so the only way you can fully or support a young person as much as possible is to be involved in their family life. And that's easier done when you are living in the community you work in, because it's almost like you're just embedded into that community. So, you know, if you needed a cup of sugar, you could go to that parent's house. You could go to the shop, but you could go to the parent's house to build that relationship and ask them, and they will give it to you. When I left the youth centre I was working at for 5 years in North Birmingham, it was the parents that put on my leaving due, not the young people. And so that was a reminder to me that, yeah, you should always, as far as possible, be working with the parent as well as the young person.
Thank you. Amie?
Yeah, I agree. It's so key to have. You can't work with a young person and isolate your interaction from the parents and every other people who are involved in their upbringing, to be honest. You know, same way we should be working with teachers, same way we should be working with the police, same way we should work with everybody who has a part in bringing up a young person in society. So working with parents and carers is key. You can only do as much as you can do. We have a lot of parents and carers who just do not engage. They have no interest in wanting to build a relationship with us, but we always try and connect with them, and it provides a richer experience for a young person. There's a lot more growth there when we have a relationship with the parents and the carers. It's, you know, like Lian said, you build up that relationship and they come to you for advice. We do a lot of stuff with parents that don't even relate to their young people per se. You know, they'll come and they'll talk to us about issues that they've got going on that really aren't actually part of a young person's experience or anything like that, but nevertheless it will have an impact on that young person because their mood, their attitude, whatever will filter down to that young person. So it's key in providing a rounded, holistic service for our young people and support network.
Questions from you, Les, before we start to think about final questions? See Les. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm terribly sorry. I'm hearing Dari speaking about community, working with the police, being that person in the middle. I've heard Amie, I've heard Lian talking about that. What I want to ask you guys, obviously you guys are seeing the thing from on the floor, grassroots. What are some of the struggles or challenges for you? Because, you know, when I see you, Amie, you're working right across London and you've got your connection outside. What are some of the challenges that you're facing in terms of your youth work? And, you know, what about funding? Someone's put in there, you know, how do you guys do these things? Because I believe that you guys are part of the solution in terms of bridging that gap between the young people on the ground, parents, and the police.
Yeah. Well, I'll take the funding aspect. That's always an ongoing concern, to be honest. There's never enough to go around. There's different organizations and trust funds and maybe some small amount of government initiative that want to provide some money, or local government. There's always stipulations around it. It's to work with a targeted group or a particular outcomes that they want to reach. So you need to kind of either change your program to make it fit, which then often means that you're going to get a little bit diluted, you know, or you have to try and find it elsewhere. Us being Christians, we just a lot of time you're praying, and God provides somehow, some way, but it's never enough for the work because there's so much work out there that needs to be done. It's ridiculous, and so, you know, you're literally living hand to mouth when it comes to the funds. But what I will say is that there is, it's like there's an trying to put it in a way that it will make understood. When you're working with young people, there needs to be consistency, which we've all said, and so you need funding that provides for that. You can do lots of different stuff over here and over there, but you need that constant being there for a young person, you know, and that kind of core funding. That's what's needed to be able to say, I'm here for you, you know, and whether it's the 4 o'clock call in the morning, in the middle of the morning, or it's the 6 o'clock call at night, or, you know, just sitting there and mediating between them and parents, whatever it is. It's just that constant work that needs to be funded. And that's where the struggle comes. I can fund a football project. I can find funding for that. That's great. But I need funding for every day.
We hear you. We hear you. Lian, what are the challenges there?
I mean, hit the nail on the head. I genuinely feel like the biggest challenge is around fundraising, finances, just because you have a lot of people who volunteer their time. So this is the flip side of it, but they cannot fully commit necessarily because they have to have a full-time job, they've got a family. So a lot of the time it is around finances. I think also sometimes being able to access resources can be challenging. And so people offering things or reducing the price of things to accommodate the kind of programs that we might need to put on for an occasion would be helpful, as well as some support. I remember when I did my youth work degree, my lecturer said, youth work is a thankless job. You will never hear a thank you. And actually having a space where you can meet other people or just be kind of imparted into, so almost like encouraged to continue going, that's something that is invaluable. Knowing that you're being prayed for and encouraged is something that, there's no words, knowing that someone is praying for you while you're doing what God has called you to do.
Thank you. Dari, you just hold it there, but because we probably want you to finish off. But what I want to ask the police officers, and if all three could respond to this, because time is going from us, can you tell us something of the good work that the police is doing? Because often we hear bad news. We get all the big bad news. But, I've been working with the police for over 25 years, doing different things, okay? And yet I know that there's some good things. Just tell us some of the good things that are happening. Andy?
Yeah, so locally in Northern Ireland, as I said, the reason the MBPA, the reason that challenge is needed, because that needs to be the catalyst for change, and that needs to be really the not just the challenge, but the solution along with it. And I think policing has locally anyway, we've definitely responded to that. We have just funded a number of initiatives with the Rio Ferdinand Foundation and with smaller grassroots organisations that target Black and Asian communities in particular. And for me, again, it's about bringing those young people together. And it's those programmes that I've discussed earlier. They've also got us heavily involved now in, and that's the Black Police Association, involved in upskilling their neighbourhood teams, making them aware of the cultural differences and the unique needs at each community, because sometimes we do look at community just as one homogenous group, but it's not. It's understanding that each community and section of the community is different and needs a different policing approach and stay to actually meet their needs. So that's been really useful as well. Unconscious bias training was spoken about, but as the president of the MBPA as well, nationally, I've been engaging with a lot of stakeholders. The National Police Chiefs Council at the minute are implementing a race action plan, which we're hoping will bring about wholesale fundamental changes to policing across the UK. We've also engaged more so with HMIC, with the IOPC, and with all of those people that hold policing to account. It's about getting into that kind of prevention and change bit. And I think, because of the death of George Floyd, because of the rise of Black Lives Matter and the highlighting of these issues, it has really been a catalyst. I think policing is listening. For us now, it's just about turning those words into action. And I'm hopeful that, as we move on, that confidence can increase.
Thank you. Baz?
Yeah, I would sort of echo what Andy said. One of the striking things for me, certainly last year, was when all the Black Lives Matter came to a front following the awful murder of George Floyd, was how a lot of, or most police forces, certainly the chief officers, supported the Black Lives Matter movement. You'd think there would be an automatic disconnection with that. So I think that was great. In terms of what good things we're doing, certainly, there's the BPAs all over the UK are doing lots of community engagement. I know what we're doing here is, looking to go into schools that are predominantly made up of, Black and Asian pupils. We're going in there, we're doing things like natural born leaders, giving interview skills, preparing them for life. So I think there is a lot of good work that just isn't recognised because, I suppose the press only want the bad news. You do one bad thing and 10 people hear about it. You do one good thing and 2 people hear of it. But I think there's great work in all forces and all BPAs, and we just don't hear about it.
Thank you, Baz. Jeff?
I would say that there is a real effort being made, and it was made earlier, is about how we humanize our officers. We have a program which we call Behind the Badge, where we encourage our officers to go to local radio stations, media outlets, and start to demystify who they are, give that human side. And that starts to break down the barriers where people feel more comfortable having conversations. And I'll just touch on one final point, which was about parents. I had a conversation with a mother of a young boy, is about 18, young man. And we were having a conversation via the intranet. He came in, his mother stopped talking. He said to her, "Who are you talking to?" And she said, don't worry about it. And then he walked out. And she then said, "I was embarrassed to say to him that you were a police officer. And I thought, why is that? And she said, because I know he wants to join the police service, but I, as a parent, am worried about him. And I now realize that's something that I, as a parent, have to overcome, because he wants to join. I need now to work out what is it within my mindset that's preventing him from taking the opportunity. The fact that we were able to have that conversation demonstrates that we are heading in the right direction.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I know that in the chat, people have been asking about Richard. Richard is the one who set this all up this evening. I want to just say thank you, Richard, for doing it, and Churches Together in Britain and Ireland. Thank you all very much for doing that. And Richard is our technical guy behind the scene, and I just want to acknowledge that. Let's go back to Diary. Diary, just help us this summer. You're a pastor. You'll be working in the community. You'll be working with the Garda there. Just help us to sum this evening up, because, that's what we do as pastors, don't we? We give people hope. It's not all terrible.
Yes, indeed. I think the summary will just be communication, because even listening to all what we've been talking about now, we can hear some perspective of the police, some things that's going on behind the scene. That's not big, because we just expect them. They're quite objectified. We want them to respond immediately, but they have processes. So at times they want some things from us, and we have cultural backgrounds, we have personal limitations, all kinds of things, that doesn't allow the interaction. So communications, creating platforms for communications will always be better. And regarding the funding for youth work, the Lord does provide. I know, just like Amie and Lian said, we really at times work with what is already on ground, and there are many initiatives that we have to adjust, just like you're saying, so that they can provide some resources. And with that, I think we just keep making, even if the tiniest step in the right direction is better than no step. I don't think doing nothing is not an option for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say, Les, that in the chat, there's been quite a few questions and queries about the information that that Jeff was talking about how to join, about where people would learn and to get more information. So all I can say is, perhaps if people want to get that information, perhaps offline, they'll contact Richard Reddy through CTBI, and he'll be able to put them in touch with Jeff, so that we can disseminate that information about what are the opportunities. Somebody asked about nationality and whether you've got to be a British citizen, but doesn't matter. That can be done offline. But I wanted to just say to Jeff, to encourage him to say that there have been questions people asking about the opportunities that are out there.
That's great to hear. And even if people don't want to join, but they want to have the conversation, we're more than happy to have that conversation. So we will. If Richard can send us their details, we will be in contact.
And I think the other thing before Les sums up was just to say, I think this is, well, for me, one of the first times that we've been able to bring people from Northern Ireland, from the Republic of Ireland, from Wales, from the Midlands, and from London, all together, youth workers, church workers, and the police, talking as a community about key issues for the Black and minority ethnic community in this country, and for the bridge building that's needed between young people and the police. So I'm really thrilled to have been able to be part of it and to listen to the work that you're doing and to the solution-based approach that you use in your work every day. Thank you from me.
Thank you. And once again, before we close, and we are going to be on time, we've got a minute left, I want to very much thank Churches Together Britain and Ireland and Synergy Network, but I also want to thank our panel, Amie. I want to thank you, Andy, Baz, thank you, Jeff, thank you, Lian, thank you, and Diary, thank you all very much for this evening. Please remember that this session was recorded, so in a few days' time, you'll be able to download it go to the Churches Together in Britain and Ireland website, and you'll be able to download this this evening webinar. But let me also say the final last word. I want to say to our police officers, thank you very much for all the years of service that you have given to serve your community. And I want you to know that we, the church, are praying for you guys and your families and your well-being. So thank you. And Lian, Amie, I want to thank you very much as youth workers. You've been at it for years. I want to thank you. And I know that you represent thousands of youth workers across the United Kingdom. We want to say thank you for what you're doing. Please keep doing that. And we just want to also just say to you, Diary, thank you very much for joining us. We were hoping to have someone from Scotland, but we didn't quite make it. But Scotland, great to know that some good things are happening in Scotland. Thank you all very much for joining from me and from Rosemarie. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening. Good night.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you.